Chris Sutton and Kris Boyd are having a dig at Celtic today. Kris Boyd, we'll start with him. He says this morning, Atletico Madrid are a good European side. They have some world-class talents in their team, but they are not absolute elite. Kris Boyd, they're sitting just a couple of points off the top of the table in La Liga, just behind Real Madrid. They had a chance, if they won their last game, to go top of the league ahead of Real Madrid in La Liga. If that's not an elite team, they'll tell me what is, because there certainly isn't one in Scotland when you look at it on the bigger picture. Kris Boyd went on to say there's not a chance that they'll win the Champions League. Well, I think they might be wrong there. They'll be there and thereabout towards the end, where no Scottish team in living memory anyway, in the last 20-30 years would get near that. Celtic folded, he said on Tuesday night, and fair play to Alistair Johnson for admitting that it was unacceptable, says Kris Boyd. Some of the cheerleaders out there should pay attention to that, as I've heard a lot of nonsense coming out about Celtic's Champions League displays in the last 2 seasons. Who's he having a dig at? Is he having a dig now at John Hartson? And I know he's not having a dig at Chris Sutton, because Chris Sutton has given it the way it is. But there are a lot of people in the media and in Celtic fan media also that have tried to say that it's not as bad as what it is. But it is as bad as what it is. Some cheerleaders, he said, are talking a lot of nonsense. Who is he talking about, I wonder? Who is Kris Boyd talking about? He then goes on to say, he says, I am told Ange Postecoglou and Rodgers play attacking football because it is the Celtic way. Sorry, he says. He says the Celtic way in the Champions League these days is to lose. Now, remember, the Rangers got the world record for being the worst Champions League team ever. And I don't think Celtic are anywhere close to that, but it just shows you the state of Scottish football. So try and talking up Scottish football, Kris Boyd, rather than having little digs at Celtic as much as you can. He says, Kris Boyd then went on to say, look, Rodgers in his own Champions League record with Celtic is one win in 16 games against Anderlecht in 2017. Of those 75 conceded goals since 2013, he likes to jump around dates, and it's all good to give the bigger picture over Celtic over the last 10 or so years. But he does have a right good dig at Rodgers, and you've got to say, look, he's not actually, there's nothing what he's saying isn't not true. Of those 75 goals conceded in 2013, 46 have been on Brendan Rodgers' watch. It begs the question, is he just a flat track bully in Scottish football? Now, he might be a bully in Scottish football, but he's won trebles, he's won doubles, and he's still on course to win the league this season, unless we have a complete collapse, which I don't think will happen. Since his time at Celtic, he has seen off Mark Warburton. You remember him with the nice little spiky hat. And remember, Rangers fans at that time went to football games with cones of Warburton's bread on their head. Wow. And then they brought in Pedro Canixa. Brendan Rodgers did see off Pedro Canixa, and then he was sacked also. And then in came the one and only Graham Murty. Graham Murty was the one manager who decided to do a headstand. Yep, a headstand when Celtic were beating them. A headstand at the side of the pitch. Strange words. And then they had Michael Beale. Michael Beale to come in, who's the saviour. Michael Beale, who's the man who worked with the one and only Gerrard for seasons, and even though Gerrard done nothing for seasons, and then during the COVID year, he was the brains behind it. Michael Beale was the brains behind that one and only season where they won the league. And he then came back to save them. And lasted 10 months. But Kris Boyd doesn't mention that. Kris Boyd doesn't mention any of those. Anyway, during his long career at Scottish football, he scored once in the Champions League, did Kris Boyd. And how many times did he score against Celtic? I think he scored once against Celtic. Anyway, that's Kris Boyd. We move on to the big man, Kris Sutton, because I have a bit more respect for Kris Sutton and what he says. And he doesn't miss when it comes to Celtic. A bit like myself, you've got to have your opinion. It is called the One Celtic Fan's View. Kris Sutton's view is Celtic knew the date of the first Champions League group match in the second week of May when they won the league against Hearts back in Tynecastle. It seems so long ago, where we had those exciting times of winning the league for the second time in a row. That was a whole 4 months before the Champions League started, said Chris Sutton. He says a whole 4 months. Postecoglou was still building a team. They had their experiences of that first campaign in the Champions League, and those who stayed could use them. Those who were leaving were going to need replaced properly, and strengthened was also needed. They finished the campaign with only 2 points last term. It was clear to everyone that when Ange Postecoglou changed the team in the last 3 or 4 games of the season, that the squad players weren't good enough, and it's now the fact that we're actually playing with those squad players this season, believe it or not. You can't legislate for injuries, said Chris Sutton, to the likes of Cameron Carter-Vickers, Leila Bada, even if those two had been available for Rotterdam on the night, the squad was still weaker than the one that finished last term against Real Madrid in the Bernabeu. I'm going to repeat myself, said Chris Sutton. That was unforgivable. It's unforgivable that Celtic did not strengthen their team. I'm going to talk about players that did come in and the wage structure at Celtic in just a minute, so keep watching this video. I'm not going to keep repeating myself, said Chris Sutton, and neither should Celtic. The direction of travel has to stop. It has to be altered now. The fact is, it should already be happening. Rodgers is a quality manager. He knows what is needed and what we can expect on the recruitment front. The parameters of the club model are as follows. Last summer, the average age and the prototype that the Celtic just drives me nuts, this. The prototype, the age of players, and the specific age of players is between 18 and 23. Now remember, Celtic have a B team and they put all these players that are 18 to 21 out on loan. So we generally buy in players between the ages of 18 to 23 that have some international recognition at some level, and then maybe they can maybe progress and move on. And the salary they expect is in the ballpark of between 10 and 16,000. Why don't we give those young boys that come through at Celtic a wage rise from £300 or £400 a week to $4 or $5 grand a week to keep them at Celtic? Ben Doak for one. The transfer fees this summer have all been below £5 million. That's enough to deliver the trophies and everything in Scotland, but when it comes to the likes of Real Madrid, Barcelona, Atletico Madrid, inflicting pain on them is absolutely impossible with this type of players. In UEFA competitions, we've had Maribor, Malmö, Cluj, Midtjylland, and all sorts of teams over the years that have came in and done damage to Celtic. When you look at what happened when Ange Postecoglou came into the club, he bought in players in the region. He brought in Carter-Vickers and Jota, who signed for $6.5 million, and the wages are likely to be double that. If Celtic had turned down the deal for Jota last summer, he was going to be put onto $45 grand a week. That was written into his contract. Now, obviously, Jota seen the big bucks. That would have been if Celtic had turned down, I don't want to say a Newcastle or a Sunderland or a mid-table team in England, a Leeds or something to stop him going. He would have got that wage increase. Celtic are now signing players for about £10,000 a week, which on the grand scale of things is a fantastic amount of money for anyone to be playing. But in today's modern football, even when you look back to the Martin O'Neill years, we were bringing in 20 years ago, we were paying 20 to 25 grand a week for players. Have Celtic progressed in the last 20 years? No, unfortunately they haven't. Chris Sutton knows that we haven't progressed, and it's completely unforgivable. Chris Sutton said it is unforgivable the way that the club has been run at the moment. Tell me your thoughts in the comments. And people say, where are these kind of videos when we're winning trebles and everything? These kind of videos were about at the time, and people would complain about it on social media, the fact that we weren't progressing in Europe. We haven't progressed in Europe, and this is what it comes down to. We have not progressed in Europe in the last 10 years, for definite. So on that note, tell me what you think in the comments. Tell me what you think about Kris Boyd. Kris Boyd having a go at Celtic. Is he calling out Brendan Rodgers? Is Brendan Rodgers the right man to take us forward, or does it come down to the board? Does it come down to the board? Because there's a lot of people unhappy with the board. I did say, let's get these players in. The 9 players that we brought in last summer, we did not need 9 players when you look at the squad. We brought in a lot of players for really cheap money and cheap wages, and they're just not doing it at the top level for Celtic. So on that note, hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure you give it a thumbs up, and I'll see you on the next one. Have a great day, Celtic fans all around the world.